There was a time when the world knew how to speak, but he couldn't remember. The sun rose slowly over the walls of Uruk. The light colored the clay bricks still humid of the night, while the smell of freshly baked bread mixed with that of wet ground. Every morning seemed identical to the previous. The merchants opened their stalls. The peasants arrived with barley-filled baskets. The priests crossed the courtyards of the temple without rush. But under that calm, an invisible problem grew. Everything depended on memory. How many sheep were delivered? How many grain bags were in the warehouse? Who already paid the tribute? The answers lived only in people's heads, and the memory. He was wrong. I was a little more than a boy. I spent my days carrying baskets and watching adults discuss. I almost understood nothing of their words, but I saw their faces. Every mistake meant a fight. Every forgetfulness could turn into a loss. Sometimes a harvest season was enough for no one to remember the truth. The wind crossed the narrow streets of the city. It was then that I noticed a man sitting in the shadow of the temple. In front of him there were no goods. He didn't sell fabrics. He didn't sell animals. He only had a soft clay tablet and a pointed stylus. I watched him press the tip on the clay. A sign. Then another. Then another. They weren't drawings. They weren't decorations. They looked like thoughts that they found a place to stop. The silence around him was different from any other silence. It seemed the time itself was waiting. At that moment, I could not imagine that those little signs would change the fate of every human being. And yet everything was starting right there, with a piece of clay, and with a question that no one had yet learned to read. The next day, I returned to the same place before the sun was high. The man was already there. The clay table rested next to him. She was dry. The signs impressed the day before had become as hard as the land from which they came. They didn't seem simpler incisions. They seemed to remember. Stay away, I didn't mean to interrupt your job. In front of him there were people of all kinds. A breeder, a merchant, a temple administrator. Everyone spoke for a few moments. The man listened silently. Then he looked down. The stylus sank slowly into the clay. Each pressure left a small wedge-shaped footprint. They weren't images of reality. They were symbols. Each symbol represented something that would no longer be entrusted only to memory. A quantity, an animal, a harvest, a name. For the first time, words began to have a body. Work seemed slow, but nobody protested. Everyone was waiting for their turn. Because a tablet didn't forget. The elderly told that, for generations, the accounts had been entrusted to small clay tokens kept in sealed spheres. They worked, until the world had become too big. Now, the caravans came from distant lands. The crops increased. The warehouses were filled. The memory of men was no longer enough. The city needed a new way to guard the truth. I observed those tablets with the curiosity of those who look at something without being able to understand it. How could those little signs tell a story? How could they replace a voice? How could they spend time? No one told me. But I started to figure something out. Those men weren't just carving the clay. They were teaching memories to survive their owners. The wind crossed the courtyard of the temple, and a thought began to make way inside me. If those signs could keep the words, maybe someday someone would have learned how to revive them with their eyes. For many days, I watched those tablets without understanding their secret. Every time new signs appeared, some were almost identical, others just changed. Yet the scribes never hesitated. It seemed they could hear something that was still silent for me. The scribes' lab was simple. Walls of dried bricks in the sun, wet clay blankets, tablets stacked with care. The air smelled of land and water. Every now and then a window let a blade of light enter that illuminated hundreds of small wedges etched on the surface of the tablets. They were everywhere, like footprints left by an invisible animal. One morning, a merchant arrived with a concerned face. He placed a tablet prepared weeks before the scribe. He took it in his hands. He kept her silent. He followed the signs with his eyes. Then he started talking. She wasn't remembering. She was reading. The information stored in the clay came back to live without anyone relying on memory. The merchant smiled. He found the answer he was looking for, not in a man's mind, but in those little signs. It was a silent revolution. The words no longer belonged to those who spoke to them. They could wait days, months, maybe years, and talk again. For the first time stopped being the enemy of memories. The scribes, however, were few. Learning those signs required patience. They must have been repeated hundreds of times. Every line, every wedge, every combination. Hands learned before the eyes learned before the mind. And only then was something new born. Reading, not a gift. A discipline, language capable of transforming real signs into living words. The wind made the curtains of the courtyard vibrate. I once again looked at that tablet. I didn't see any more simple engravings. I saw voices, and understood that if someone could speak through the clay, then one day he could have talked to people who were not yet born. It wasn't enough to hack the signs. You had to learn how to think. The doors of the scribe school opened at dawn. It wasn't a place reserved for warriors, neither priests. There he trained something even more rare, the mind. I entered the tip of feet. On the walls, they sat little older boys than me. In front of each, there was a fresh clay tablet, a stylus, and a patience that seemed endless. No one was talking. Only the noise of the tips sinking into the soft surface was felt. The teacher walked slowly among the students. He didn't dictate long lessons. Showed a sign, the students copied it, again, and again, and again. If a line was inclined in the wrong way, the tablet was smoothed with the palm of the hand. Work started again. The mistake was gone. Lesson remained. The first tablets that learned to read and write did not tell stories. They were lists, numbers, animals, cereals, objects. Writing was born to administer an increasingly complex civilization. But every new symbol made something even bigger possible. Every learned sign was a door that opened, a door to ideas that no longer needed the presence of those who created them. I watched the boys bent on the tablets. The fingers were dirty with clay. The eyes followed the wedges with absolute attention. They weren't just copying. They were training the brain to transform forms into meaning. It was a completely new capacity. For thousands of generations, human beings have learned to listen. Now they've started learning by looking. Knowledge changed the house. He no longer lived in the voice of the masters. He began to live in the tablets. I went out of school one last time. Tens of small signs were born at the same time. Separated, they seemed simple engravings. Together, they were building the memory of humanity, and soon those signs would stop recording only goods and collected. They'd start telling people themselves. At first, the tablet spoke only of what was needed. Wheat, Piccole, oil, beer, tributes. They were instruments, nothing more. And yet, without anyone noticing, something began to change. A scribe sat longer than usual. In front of him, there were no merchants waiting, no temple officials, no load to record, just a tablet still soft. The stylus moved slowly. A sign, then another, but he wasn't counting this time. He was telling. Maybe a prayer, maybe a king's name, maybe the memory of a flood. No one can say that for sure. Many of the first tablets were lost. Others came to us broken, yet they tell us enough to make us understand that extraordinary change. The writing had stopped saving only things. He began to guard ideas. In the following decades, the signs increased. They changed shape. They became faster to hack, more accurate, richer. They also changed people. Who knew how to write became a bridge between the present and the future. Each tablet could pass through time better than any human memory. Knowing didn't die with who owned it. It could be delivered to the next generation, and then to that later. This is how the first stories destined to last were born. Prayers, the laws, city agreements, myths. Centuries later would appear great poems such as Gilgamesh's epic, copied and copied from the scribes so that no word should be lost. Those works would never have existed without those first signs in the clay. I looked at a tablet just finished. She seemed small, fragile, easy to break. Yet he kept something more resistant than the stone. A thought, including then that a man can build a temple, You can dig a channel. It can raise gigantic walls. But nothing survives longer than an idea when someone finds a way to write it. From that moment on, the world would not have forgotten the same way, because the words had finally found a house. But their journey, it was just at the beginning. A tablet can break. It can be buried. It can stay hidden under the sand for thousands of years. Yet, if anyone can read his signs, his voice will come back. The seasons passed. The tablets increased. The temple rooms filled with records, letters, laws, and stories. Each new generation of scribes learned by copying the work of the previous one. It wasn't just an exercise. It was a witness pass. Hands changed, the words remained. Writing began to travel. He crossed the great rivers of Mesopotamia. He reached distant cities. Every people adapted it to their needs. The signs changed shape. New writing systems were born. The Egyptians sculpted their hieroglyphics on the monuments and painted them on the papyri. Many centuries later, more and more simple alphabets appeared, capable of representing the sounds of the voice with a reduced number of symbols. Reading slowly became possible for an increasing number of people. It was no longer just a privilege of scribes, it was the beginning of a new possibility. Every civilization added something: a sign, a letter, a rule, a new way to preserve knowledge. But they all shared the same intuition born many centuries before. Ideas can live longer than humans. If anyone finds a way to write them, many texts were lost. Libraries burned, cities disappeared. All kingdoms fell into silence. Yet a few tablets survived. Few papyri. Few fragments. To allow the men of the future to rebuild a past that seemed to disappear. Writing had learned to win even time. Today, opening a book seems a simple gesture. Reading a sentence takes a few moments, but every word our eyes recognize brings with it a history thousands of years. A story started when someone, in a city called Uruk, decided that a man's memory was no longer enough. And that little gesture, he changed the fate of our species. In this documentary, the following works and research institutions have been used as main historical sources. Denise Schmant-Besserat, Before Writing. Denise Schmant-Besserat, How Writing Came About. Mark van de Meerup, A History of the Ancient Near East. Karen Radner and Eleanor Robeson, The Oxford Handbook of Cuneiform Culture. Irving Finkel and Jonathan Taylor, Cuneiform. Jean Bottero, Mesopotamia, Writing, Reasoning, and the Gods. Samuel Noah Kramer, History Begins at Sumer. Piotr Michalowski, Studies on Sumerian Literature and Gilgamesh's Epoeia. Andrew Robinson, The Story of Writing. Nicholas Posgate, Early Mesopotamia, Society and Economy at the Dawn of History. The British Museum. The Louvre Museum, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Cuneiform Digital Library Initiative, University of California, Los Angeles, the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago, UNESCO Memory of the World Program, Journal of Cuneiform Studies, Cambridge Ancient History, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Some aspects of the very early stages of writing, such as the passage from clay to proto-cuneiform signs and the evolution of reading, are still subject to research and debate. The story followed the most widely shared historical consensus, distinguishing where necessary between consolidated facts and historically plausible reconstructions.